Why do you believe what you believe? Do you form your own opinions, or are you influenced by the media and the entertainment industry? Have you ever thought about where you live? Or do you just accept what you're told? When you look around, what do you see? Do you see the shape of a sphere? Or do you see a flat horizon? Are we spinning 1,000 miles an hour? Or are we stationary and fixed? Do you believe what you believe because someone told you? Or have you looked at all the available information and made a decision based on common sense and logic? There's a few things about the flat earth that globe zealots don't seem to understand. First, everyone assumes that we have to prove a flat earth. That's not the case at all. The whole thing started with the lack of evidence for the globe. We're not trying to prove another model. We tried to prove the globe model and found out that there is no evidence for the globe. Most people don't want to believe that they've been lied to on such a massive scale, so they refuse to even look at any contradictory information. You have to realize that the education system teaches you to memorize, not to think critically and come up with the answers yourself. They teach you things that you can't possibly verify for yourself, so that you look to authority for the answers. Everyone always assumes that someone smarter than you has already figured it out. You've handed over your God-given free will and effectively made these people gods. Also, if you think we live on a spinning water ball, spiraling through a space vacuum at breakneck speeds which we can't feel, I'm selling the Brooklyn Bridge for a very reasonable price if you're interested. I have the deed right here. These people will tell us that we're ignoring reality, when everywhere we look it's flat and we don't feel movement. The burden of proof is on the globe side. You have yet to prove to us that we are in fact on a spinning water ball. Pictures and videos are not scientific proof, as they can be faked very easily. Couple that with there being no experiment you can do to prove that we're moving, the fact that you can zoom in on a boat that supposedly went over a curve, and the fact that no one has ever seen curvature or been to space, you really have nothing.
So there's no experiment you can do. We could look at the decay of a radioactive nucleus or some electricity and magnetism or bounce a ball, have a pendulum, whatever it is, and there's no experiment you can do to tell you whether you're moving or not. Therefore, that concept has no meaning, because you can't measure it. And that's led Einstein to relativity. So that's the basics of general relativity, which is our best theory of the universe.
Every aspect of your education is designed in such a way that you have to rely on the experts, who are all on the payroll of the system. In the infamous words of George Carlin,
they don't want a population of citizens capable of critical thinking. They don't want well-informed, well-educated people capable of critical thinking. They're not interested in that. That doesn't help them. That's against their interest. That's right.
You see, we are nothing but cattle to these people. Useless eaters, who don't deserve to know the truth. Ordinary men and women, who are too simple-minded to govern their own affairs. If you have been paying attention for the past few years, you know that we're heading towards a dystopian future, where we'll own nothing and be happy. You have to start thinking about it as one big system of governance, instead of thinking that countries operate on their own. There's no Russian or Chinese space agencies. It's all one big space agency. After these past few years, if you haven't started questioning the science, you might be the cattle they think you are.
They want obedient workers. Obedient workers. People who are just smart enough to run the machines and do the paperwork, and just dumb enough to passively accept all these increasingly shittier jobs with the lower pay, the longer hours, the reduced benefits, the end of overtime, and the vanishing pension that disappears the minute you go to collect it. And now they're coming for your Social Security money. It's a big club, and you ain't in it. You and I are not in the big club.
The Russell Trust Association, which is the business name for the New Haven, Connecticut-based Skull and Bones Secret Society, which operates a student secret society at Yale University. As we work through this series and explore the Pyramid of Power, you will notice that certain names and institutions make several appearances. It's important to note how these people and organizations are interwoven. Keep that in mind as we work through this series. After half a decade in existence, the General Education Board ceased operating under that name and was absorbed into the Rockefeller Foundation. The Rockefeller family were not the only wealthy tycoons interested in bankrolling educational ventures. In 1905, the infamous steel magnate Andrew Carnegie founded the Carnegie Foundation for the Advancement of Teaching. Carnegie and Rockefeller were both eager to transform their images from that of rich, out-of-touch robber barons to kind, elderly gentlemen who cared about the poor. To achieve this goal, they created various foundations and philanthropic organizations to spread their vast wealth and influence. The Prussian model of education promoted by the men's organizations was the perfect tool to inculcate the masses with their message of choice, embedding within the structure of public education itself their private ideologies on the appropriate learning material and the structure for the nation's youth. American support and critique of the system grew in the first 2 decades of the 20th century. In 1918, Professor Thomas Alexander wrote the following after researching the Prussian model. We believe, however, that a careful study of the Prussian school system will convince any unbiased reader that the Prussian citizen cannot be free to do and act for himself, that the Prussian is to a large measure enslaved through the medium of his school, that his learning, instead of making him his own master, forges the chains by which he is held in servitude, that the whole scheme of Prussian elementary education is shaped with the express purpose of making 95 out of every 100 citizens subservient to the ruling house and to the state. Even more unnerving are the words of Reverend Frederick T. Gates, the business advisor to John D. Rockefeller Sr., who helped him found the General Education Board. In our dream, we have limitless resources, and the people yield themselves with perfect docility to our molding hand. The present educational conventions fade from our minds, and unhampered by tradition, we work our own goodwill upon a grateful and responsive rural folk. We shall not try to make these people, or any of their children, into philosophers or men of learning or of science. We are not to raise up among them authors, orators, poets, and men of letters. We shall not search for embryo great artists, painters, musicians, nor will we cherish even the humbler ambition to raise up among them lawyers, doctors, preachers, statesmen, of whom we now have ample supply. Former award-winning New York City school teacher and author of Dumbing Us Down, The Hidden Curriculum of Compulsory Schooling and the Underground History of American Education. Gatto was a vocal opponent to mandatory schooling following his career as a teacher until the time of his death in 2018. Gatto's main thesis is that the school system confuses the students. He says the modern school system presents an incoherent ensemble of information that the child needs to memorize to stay in school rather than teaching critical thinking. Gatto also claimed public schools make children emotionally and intellectually dependent. In Underground History, he says, "What I'm trying to describe is what has happened to our schools was inherent in the original design for a planned economy and a planned society laid down so proudly at the end of the